Good day everyone. So we will be discussing about the culture and ethics. So first is we will define what is culture. So culture is from the Latin cultura, stemming from color, meaning to cultivate. This is the set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or organizations. So, what is ethics? So, ethics is defined as a moral philosophy or code of morals practiced by a person or group of people. So, a common opinion many people hold is that one's culture dictates what is right or wrong for an individual. So, for such people, the saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, by Saint Ambrose applies to deciding on moral issues. So, this quote implies that one's culture is inescapable. So that is one has to look into the standard of her society to resolve all her ethical questions with finality. Next, generalization concerning supposed Filipino traits sometimes end up as anti-stereotypes, especially since one may hard to think if any other culture does not exhibit such traits. So, for example, is the trait that the Filipino possess, which is the hospitality. So, makaingon bata nga dili pod hospitable ang other kuan like Chinese or Japanese. So, makaingon bata nga ang Filipino kay hospitable. So, dili no kay because most probably they are hospitable too, but they showed it in different ways. Thus, to simply that there is a Filipino way of doing things. There is a Chinese way, Japanese way, Korean way. We have different ways of doing things. So, including a Filipino way of thinking about what the right thing to do and why remains a matter of discussion. James Rachels of 1941 to 2003 is an American philosopher that provided a clear argument against the validity of cultural relativism in the realm of ethics. So, Rachels defines cultural relativism as the position that claims that there is no such thing as objective truth in the realm of morality. So, argument of this position is that since different cultures have different moral codes, then there is no correct moral code that all culture must follow. So, there is no one code that all culture must obey. That implies that each culture has its own standard of doing what is right or what is wrong. So, however, Rachel's questions the logic of this argument. So, first is that cultural relativism confuses a statement of fact that different cultures have different moral codes, which is merely descriptive with a normative statement that there cannot be objective truth in morality. Rachel's also provide a counter-argument by analogy. So, that is just because some believe that the earth was flat, while some believe it is spherical, it does not mean that there is no objective truth to the actual shape of the earth. And so, beyond his criticism of the logic of cultural relativism, Rachel employs a reductio ad absurdum argument. This is an argument which first assumes that claim in question is correct in order to show the absurdity that will ensue if the claim is accepted as such. And so he posits the three absurd consequences of accepting the claim of cultural relativism. So first is that if cultural relativism was correct, then one cannot criticize the practices or beliefs of another culture anymore, as long as culture thinks that what it is doing is correct. So for example, the happenings in World War II about the Jews, where there are the Nazis, 'di ba sa World War II katong Jews nga gipamatay sa mga Nazi. So dili ta ka criticize nga ngano nabuhaton nila, for the Nazis believed that time that they were doing the right thing, kay gisugo ra maputo sila. So dili ta ka criticize ana if cultural relativism is I was correct. So number 2 is, if cultural relativism was correct, then one cannot even criticize the practices or beliefs of one's own culture. So for example, the Muslims, there are different Muslim and Christian have different cultures, practices, and beliefs that they have practices like puasa that nga wala gi-imply sa Christianity. So dili ta maka criticize about sa ilahang practices sa ilahang own culture. So number 3 is, if cultural relativism was correct, then one cannot even accept the moral progress can happen. So for example, if some societies karon nga nag-recognizes the women and children rights, that it does not represent a better situation than before when societies refuse it. So di ta kaingon nga naay moral progress sa within that issue if cultural relativism is correct. So Rachel's and his article on cultural relativism by nothing that someone can recognize and respect cultural differences and still maintain the right to criticize beliefs and practices that she thinks are wrong if she performs proper rational deliberation. So the cultural differences between one society and another, terms of norms, practices, beliefs are not trivial matters that one can disregard. So they are actually part of who one is and cannot be set aside. Thus, the challenge of ethics is not the removal of one's culture, because that is what makes us unique. So instead, one must dig deeper into her own culture in order to discover how her own people have most meaningfully explored possibly universal human questions or problems within the particularity of her own people's native ground. So ethics, therefore, should neither be reduced to one's own culture standards, nor should it simplistically dismiss one's unique cultural beliefs and practices. So moral development then is a prerequisite if the individual is to encounter ethical situations with a clear mind and with her values properly placed with respect to each other. So that's all. Thank you.